Hi, it's Dr. Darnise, and welcome back into another episode. Today, we're talking about, can magic really influence the outcome of history? Can magic influence the outcome of elections? Ooh, don't you want to know? Because don't we live in a time where it seems like, how is all of this stuff happening? Are these things happening on their own, or somebody getting some help from someplace? Mhm. So we're going to talk about it. We're going to talk about this thing called magic. And again, if you need a definition, a working definition for magic, think of it as trying to harness power, trying to tap into a force that's greater than ourselves and harness it for one's own use. Right. So it could be, we talk about hoodoo mostly on this channel. And so it could be that where you're working roots for medicine. You could be using it for protection spells. You could be doing a whole lot of different things with it. But you could also be using magic for the domination of others. And so, as we think about Western civilization in which we happen to live, and we happen to see what's going on in not only the United States, but throughout Europe, where a lot of uh, powerful governments are actually falling right now, we're seeing a scramble to hang on to power. That's what we're really witnessing, right? It's like the dying gasp of of Western civilization that has based itself on the domination of other people, and now we see a sort of shift in that, and people are taking back power. So what we're looking at, though, is people who are willing to do almost anything for the privilege of dominating others. And so that's the kind of magic that I'm talking about right now. Are we on a continuum of what we've known to be the existence of people in high places using, let's say, magic or occult practices for their own benefit? And I use the word occult, but that doesn't, people get afraid of that word. The word really just means hidden, right? Occult means hidden. And so these things are not necessarily evil in and of themselves. What makes them harmful is that when harm is intended, right? Because we can use magic, we can use roots to help people, right? To heal people, to protect. I mean, we can do a lot of good things with so called magic and roots. And then there is also another use where you could, do some harm to people for sure, and you can dominate others, right? You can use it for the benefit of yourself only and position yourself others so that you have domination. And so we can look back at a historical figure who was in Queen Elizabeth's court, Queen Elizabeth I. So this is the 1500s, and she had her own court magician, astrologer, astronomer, occultist by the name of John Dee. Very well known. It was one of the ways that one gained knowledge and power back in the day was to understand magic and astrology in particular. And so John Dee was a very intelligent man. We would say today a Renaissance man. I mean, he had one of the most extensive libraries in any private collection. And to the extent that people wanted to even steal his books, people understood that he had specialized knowledge and people wanted it. They saw him as a very powerful person. And he was advising Elizabeth I in her royal role as Queen of England. She leaned on him for insight on how to rule over the British Empire. Well, move ahead several centuries to the 1980s, move ahead to the presidency of Ronald Reagan, and it was well known, it was joked about that Ronald and Nancy Reagan had a White House astrologer. Now, at the time, people kind of laughed about it and dismissed it or whatever, but no one said it wasn't true. They were known to continue to have their astrologer. You can Google that. If you think, I never heard of that. Well, you can Google it. Uh, Ronald and Nancy Reagan used an astrologer. And so, what we're talking about is that these systems for power have never gone away. And, now we can say that we can look back in history and say, okay, yeah, this has always been in use. Okay, so how might it be used today when we're looking at what we're looking at in terms of who's coming into power in the United States, and really world power, leaders who've managed to stay in power for 20, 25 years or more because they have positioned themselves as an authoritarian figure. How does that work? How does it work that you really can dominate people for such a long time? I mean, if you think about Russia, Russians certainly have their own systems of magic. They have their own, systems of witchcraft, if we want to talk about that, right? All over Eastern Europe. There are very powerful systems of magic that come out of Eastern Europe. And so who knows what's going on at the Kremlin? But anyway, this video is really to discuss, where do we see or how might we recognize systems of magic that are happening right in front of us? So, I gave you that reference all the way back to the 15th century, John Dee and Queen Elizabeth I's court, and then Ronald Reagan in the 1980s. But sometimes you see in movies or TV shows, you see a little hint. If you know what you're looking at, you'll see depictions of something called ceremonial magic, right? Ceremonial magic. I've talked about it on the channel before. You see depictions of it. I can think of, in particular, the TV show Lovecraft Country. You ever watch Lovecraft Country? By the time you get to the end of um, those episodes, right, later on into the season, you see the form of power that's keeping um, the powerful people powerful. So Lovecraft Country is set in what, 1950s America. So, racism is just explicit, right? And white people assume that they have power over others and they are trying to get even more power. So by the time you get into those later episodes, and I hope I'm not spoiling it for anybody, by the time you get into those later episodes, you see people, in front of that pentagram that's on the ground, painted on the floor, and they've got the hoods and the candles and everything. It's a familiar depiction. And anytime we see that in a film or a TV show, people get nervous and we're like, oh my God, they must be worshiping the devil. It's not that they're worshiping the devil, right? Like, I mean, some people might be. But it is that they are, let's say, summoning power for themselves, right? And in Lovecraft Country, what you see is that they're basically willing to do anything for power, for domination of others. And so, yeah, they've got the pentagram on the floor, they've got the hoods, they've got the candles, and they've got like swords, and they're doing all sorts of bloodletting kind of um, rituals. So we get a glimpse into this thing called ceremonial magic, and we think that it's always negative because it's been used in our media to represent something evil. But in fact, it is a way of harnessing power, and it is dependent upon your intention. What do you intend to do? If you summon power, what do you intend to do with it? Do you summon the angels to help you, or do you summon some other energies that don't necessarily care what you do with it? They just show up and lend you their power. So here we are. It is almost 2025, and we are looking at a political system that seems um, almost too outrageous to be normal. So I asked you, could it be paranormal? Could it be something where, well, we'll never know what exactly goes on in those back rooms? Could it be where they've got their own, hooded robes and their own pentagram on the floor because they're harnessing power for the domination of others? I asked the question. And so I look forward to your comments. What do you think? Have you seen Lovecraft Country? Did you pay attention to what you were seeing? Because the thing is, people will give themselves away. Because if we're seeing that part in a movie or a TV show, what other part do we not see? And we know that people don't give up power. So if Queen Elizabeth I had it, we know that it didn't go away, right? That got passed along through Western civilization, right? That never goes away. People don't give up power like that. They say, this is what you do, this is how you do it. We are a secret society. We can tell other people little bits and pieces, but we're never going to give away the whole show. Mostly, we're going to tell other people to go to church and pray for their souls that they don't go to hell. Meanwhile, we're over here doing whatever we want to do. So the little people can go to the priest and beg for absolution and for the forgiveness of sins. Or you can go to pray in front of a cross and beg for the forgiveness of your sins. But people in power don't do that. They use power for themselves just because they think they should have it. And on that note, I'll leave you because it's a really rich conversation topic, and I'm just curious what you all know about it already, what you might like to hear me talk about more on this in this regard. If you haven't never heard of John Dee, go and look him up. He had a partnership with a man by the name of Edward Kelly, and together they did a lot of what we call magic. John Dee and Edward Kelly, a very well-known magical duo or occult duo from back in the day, who definitely influenced world politics as it was at the time. All right, so I'm going to wrap it up here. Let me know what you think, and I'll see you next time.